I hereby call this meeting to order, the Budget Committee meeting, May 17, 2022. So I don't think anybody left. So we'll stay with the same people who are already here. So we need to appoint a Budget Committee chair. I'm open to nominations for a Budget Committee chair.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to appoint Brenda Coffey.
I second. I have a motion and a second. Is there any question?
To be fair, would Councilor Prophet like to accept this?
Oh my goodness.
She doesn't have a choice.
Sure.
All right. She has accepted, so we'll go into a roll call vote, please.
Most definitely.
Junior,
Yes.
Katie Norton. Yes. Leslie Pearson,
Yes.
Isaac Williams,
Yes.
Paul Kiefer,
Yes.
Emerald Lantis,
Yes.
Lisa Middlestorm,
Yes.
Alejandra Mendoza,
Yes.
Sonia Neal,
Yes.
Brenda Prophet. You want to vote for yourself? Yes. Okay.
All right, congratulations, Brenda. You now have the chair.
So the length of this meeting will not exceed 2 hours. There will not be any breaks for the, actually, if the meeting exceeds 1 hour, there will be a 5-minute rest period. The length of individual speaking time will be limited to 3 minutes, and the review process is as follows. All budget meetings are subject to public meeting law. At this meeting, the budget officer will propose the budget. We will hear the budget message. The budget officer will present the budget documents, and the budget committee will hear and consider public comment pertinent to the budget. After discussion and revisions, if necessary, the budget committee will approve the budget and the property tax levies. This marks the end of the budget committee obligation. Next, a public hearing will be held by the Boardman City Council. The City Council will adopt the budget and certify taxes. Tax certification documents will be submitted to the Morrow County Tax Assessor's Office by July 15th, and a copy of the budget documents will be submitted to the Morrow County Clerk by September 30th. So, without further ado, Budget Officer.
Thank you. The budget message that I will read starts on page 5 of the City of Boardman proposed budget booklet. Members of the City of Boardman Budget Committee, I am pleased to present to you the proposed budget for your consideration of the 2022-2023 fiscal year. We are mostly back to our pre-pandemic routines, with some remaining inhibitors, but are still making progress through the city's projects. Infrastructure projects always have a long time in planning before any actual dirt work or construction work are seen. During the past few years, we have been working on just that, planning and design. The citizens of Boardman passed a GO bond in the amount of $20,320,000 to fund a new collector well, a water booster pump station, a new water reservoir with an approximate 1 million gallon capacity, the addition of a new 13-acre wastewater lagoon, including the purchase of land and construction of the lagoon and wastewater lift station. This GO bond also refunded the outstanding balances of the previous water and wastewater bonds. This was done simultaneously when the bonds were sold and all the issuance costs were paid. The remaining proceeds, being $18,498,750, are being used for the aforementioned projects. Most of these projects are being completed simultaneously, and if supply resources hold up, we anticipate utilizing up to 70% of the funds in this coming year. Another infrastructure project in the works is the replacement of outdated water lines along Northwest Columbia Avenue. The initial scoping has been completed, and we are in the design and drawings phase. This project's completion is anticipated by the end of the summer. As we continue to progress through the ramifications of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are pleased to announce that the City of Boardman was awarded federal assistance from the American Rescue Plan Act through the established coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. The first allotment from these funds was dispersed earlier this year, with the other half being dispersed this coming fiscal year. Combined, we were awarded approximately $832,700. The city will invest in an advanced metering infrastructure system, sewer and road infrastructure, and personnel investment. The timing of these funds was imperative to the city in order to move forward with some of these projects. The East Laurel Lane Loop Road project was one of them. This project has been in the works for years and site work is currently underway. An extension of the road into a loop and the extension of sewer services into that area of Boardman are the main infrastructure additions of this project. These projects meet the eligibility use of the state local fiscal recovery funds funding. The use of these funds has restrictions and the reporting of fund expenditures and obligations has been submitted. The building department is actively pursuing the implementation of a completely online permitting process. Staff have sat through numerous presentations and software demonstrations to find the right fit for the building department and its clients. It's an exciting time and many more staff hours will be invested to get this up and going. It will also contain a planning module so that all relevant property approvals and permits are housed in a single database. Some other additions to the city processes are the implementation of a business license registry, an update to the system development charges formulation and fees, of which we are currently working on with FCS consultants, and awaiting the report of the traffic study done in April 2022 along Main Street. This report is an important aspect of future planning of upgrades on Main Street. We all know of the congested intersections along the street, and this report will give us a professional engineered look at the real issues and possible resolutions or recommendations to help with the flow, reduction of congestion, and the safety of drivers, pedestrians, and bystanders. The City Council has agreed that the partnership with the Boardman Community Development Association is of utmost value. It is supportive of future partnership efforts throughout the city. A sidewalk along East Columbia Avenue to address the safety of the pedestrians who walk that route is planned for this summer. Easements and underground utilities needed to be mapped and configured in the possible layout of the sidewalk. This project is also currently in the architectural and engineering drawings phase. The city will be financially responsible for the cost of the drawings and engineer fees, and BCDA will complete the actual construction of the sidewalks. The city's boundary of Wilson Lane is awaiting a chip seal. As the Morrow County Public Works Department gets their equipment scheduled for this part of Boardman, we will have this project completed by then. Similar work has been performed through intergovernmental resources, and they have worked out for both entities, and we will continue this partnership into the future. The next big project is an expansion of the current City Hall building. It's hard to believe that this building is already 18 years old. This building houses the police department on the north side of the building and all of the departments on the City Hall side, which is the south side of the building. The building department utilizes a good portion of the City Hall side. It is no doubt that it is one of the busiest departments within its side of the building. Office space and workspace have become scarce, and the building official prefers for the department to remain in the same location as the other city functions. The addition will provide needed space for its staff, its clients, and prospective developers to more efficiently carry out the needed tasks. As you can see, Boardman is in no way a dormant city. The ability to make these projects a realization and not remain in the planning phase requires a set of skilled staff. And we're very proud of the staff that we have working and overseeing these projects to fruition. If you see a city employee, please thank them for their efforts and for their dedication. I didn't even address the day-to-day tasks that it takes to keep the city running. I believe this budget sets the financial path to the roadmap of projects in store for us. Respectfully submitted, Marta Barajas, Budget Officer and Finance Director. Beginning with our general fund, it is by far our largest fund in terms of activity and transactions. It houses most of our general, operational, and administrative revenues and expenses. And our previous, a couple years ago, our biggest revenue source were property taxes, of which we do expect approximately a 7.7 increase in property taxes collected, or in property taxes that we expect to collect versus what we have previously. That does include a 4% discount that we calculate in there for the bad debts for people who it takes them years to pay their taxes. So we take a conservative approach, and the county also takes a conservative approach when they send out their calculation of what they expect for the city of Boardman. In our resources, like I said, prior to a few years ago, property taxes was the largest revenue source. You will see that our grants and loans line item, it looks like it just took a huge, enormous jump from prior years. Included in there are a lot of new grants that we had not been receiving. Many of these large grants have come from the Columbia River Enterprise Zone. We anticipate to be awarded what we were at minimum, what we were awarded this year, being $1,383,000. And that was to the city of Boardman for being a sponsor on the Crest 2 board. The Boardman Police Department is awarded $165,000. And all of the resources are captured in this fund, in the general fund. So the police department does not have a separate fund for resources. All their expenditures are tracked in a separate department within the fund, but all revenues are just lumped together. Amazon also, this year, they, somehow there was a misapplication of the categorical exemptions, and that got passed on to our Morrow County tax assessor. And when Amazon realized what had happened, they reached out and said, well, something wasn't categorized correctly, but ORS 311.2066 states that additional taxes may not be assessed and imposed if they are a result of an exemption granted in error by a tax official. But being a good business partner in the community that they wanted to be as, Amazon stated they would like to pay the amount of what would have been the tax, even though there's no statutory requirement for them to do so. And so they made a payment of $11,545,618 issued to Morrow County for it to be dispersed as if taxes had been collected. The Morrow County Commissioners voted to share this payment with most of the taxing districts within Morrow County. And they awarded to the city of Boardman $200,000. Towards our bond, they allocated $316,665. This was noted that these would be a one-time payment. And so the funds were received this year. In our budget, you see them under beginning cash because it'll be a cash carryover. And then we will be transferring those funds. And I will explain the transfers a little bit further down in the same budget year. And if I get you confused when I mention this year, next year, please go ahead and ask me and clarify, because I know sometimes it's hard to distinguish this year from next year, especially when we're talking about money and grants and figures and projects. So if I don't make it clear, please let me know and I can.
Did you say cash carryover already? I was thinking of other things. What's our
Yes.
cash carryover from 2021 to 20, or for the last budget year, I guess is what I'm saying. So we have the new budget, so that would be 21-22, right?
For
That's our
20
last budget,
Yes,
and we're going into 22-23, correct?
yes.
So what is our cash carryover for the city of Boardman as far as total budget money?
What was it for 21-22, or what are we budgeting for 22-23?
Well, I guess we can't say since 21-22 is not over yet, right?
It's, but the beginning cash was on July 1st. So 21-22, our beginning cash in the general fund was $4,219,000. We're estimating this year our beginning cash to be $2,850,000.
Okay.
And in 21-22, we also got funding from CREZ, which gave us that large amount to carry over, and then we transferred it into.
Oh, gotcha. So so the CREZ money gave a boost.
Yes,
So we're usually keeping around $2 million as cash carryover. $2 to $4 million.
when we've been receiving these grants, yes.
When we don't receive grants, it's usually zero. We should
No,
have a cash carryover.
Yeah,
right,
we do
though?
have cash carryover, but it just depends on the timing of grants.
Gotcha.
Are we looking at page 10?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
Are you looking at page 10?
No, I was just asking a question because I was thinking other things like for other questions, but I was on page 11.
Well, the only reason I'm pointing out page 10 is that it has the actual for 19 years, 1920 and 2021. Then it shows you what the budget was for 21-22.
On
So,
page 10.
so you can kind of see how much we've had cash carryover, the beginning cash in those years.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Leslie, you had a question?
Yeah, can you just repeat, you said of that $11 million Amazon paid to the county, 200,000 was distributed to the city of Boardman, and did you mention $300,000 went somewhere else?
Towards our bond, our GO bond.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I see
I
what you're
have a
saying.
question. Is that what we would have received if we had received it as taxes?
No, we probably would have received more, but I don't have all the breakout of what tax districts it would apply to and what their rates are to do an actual breakout in comparison. Because it was over 2 years. So we would have to know year one, what taxing districts that affected and the tax rates then, and then year two, what taxing districts that affected and their rates that year to allocate it all up, to know exactly or closer to what we would have gotten.
I got a question again for you, Martha. So we kind of actually increased from 1.7 to 3.0 to 4.9, and that's largely due for cash carryover due to grants that we received later in that year that we don't spend.
Yes, 2020, the fiscal year 2020, 2021 is when we really started getting, well, actually any grant money from CREZ too. Before that, the city was not a recipient. They were on the board, but it was dispersed to other categories. And it wasn't until then that the sponsors finally took the disbursement.
I got you. So the increase of the cash carryover is partly due to the CREZ funding.
Yes. Another grant that we are happy to get every year is from the Morrow County School District for our SRO officer. We received $50,000 from them. And a grant we just got this year, I know through the pandemic, we all saw how the federal government was dispersing funds, different rounds for families, then for businesses, and they finally got to local government. It took them almost 3 years to finally get there. But we did receive half of our allotment. They did divide it out in two. So we have received the first half of our allotment, which is $416,356. And we anticipate receiving the second half shortly after the beginning of this fiscal year is what we've been told. And then I'll go into depth as to what we're going to do with those funds. And We always allow for other revenues because we do have, like we said, some of these grants, some of these small ones show up or that we're eligible for. The police department is applying for a small $6,000 grant. So to allow for those, small cities grants, things like that.
Mark, I have a question. Is it appropriate to talk about the police, public safety, police budget now, or is that coming?
That's coming.
Okay,
We're getting it. So this is the fund that is broken out into departments. All the other funds are pretty much one fund and that's it. This is the one that is broken out to departments. First, we have our general government, which is your administrative staff, your office staff, and also city council expenses and city council goals, any extra little projects that we have that can be allocated to a general government department. If it's something that is even broader, that'll go in our last department, which is the non-departmental department. Now in the public safety, we have seen our city grow. We keep seeing businesses expand. I know we see new faces all the time. And in order to keep the safety, the public safety at the safety that we've all been accustomed to, Chief of Police has asked to hire another police officer to help with coverage and to help with the increase in volume of calls so that we can keep continuing to have the public safety that we've grown accustomed to. And so we have included the costs in this budget for the addition of the police officer, for the addition of the vehicle and uniform and supplies that additional police officer would entail.
So it's up $200,000 if I'm reading it correctly. For another officer, it's $200,000.
It also includes, I'm gonna go back a little bit, back to the revenues. When we received funding for, from the ARPA funds, one of their push was you need to invest in your personnel. This is also why we're giving this money to local governments. You need to invest in your personnel. So we do have a premium pay worked in here for every employee. That's a one-time premium pay. Along with the COLA increase for our current personnel. So a combination of all of those is what makes that increase. And so not just the new police officer.
my question was on the 12 FTE. Who's the other halftime police officer? Isn't it?
We don't have a half-time police officer.
Well, wouldn't Schreiber be a halftime for you?
No, the SRO is completely funded by, well, for the most part, the city, the school, and monies from CREZ. But he's still a full-time employee of the police department. He's not an employee for the school.
Where do you see that number?
I just see 12 FTE, so I was trying to think, I thought he was
Page
halftime,
10.
Oh,
I thought he was halftime school.
He's a full-time employee for the police department assigned to the schools.
Yes. The city does not have a department for schools. So he is a full-time employee of the police department. He reports to police supervisors, to the police chief for 100% of his duties.
So why are we, I guess my question is, why are we paying for part SRO if we're not utilizing this? I mean, if we're paying for, if he's a full-time officer, are we just taking the cash to help supplement a job? Is that what we're doing?
So his primary assignment is the school resource, as a school resource officer. That is his primary assignment.
When the city council first agreed to do this, Mr. Cooper, we knew that the school district would not be able to fund the entire cost of an SRO. So what the city council at the time decided to do, if I remember correctly, Karen, you and Chief can help on this, I'm sure. But we decided that we would take the money from the school district, and I believe that they spend the same amount in each city or in each school area, like Irrigan, Hebner, Boardman. And we would take that money from them, but we would hire someone and we would bring up the rest of the balance of that salary. And we would pay for that as a way to support the city of Boardman and the school district.
I guess where I'm coming from, I think we're at a time where we need to change our SRO, and he needs to be a full-time officer in Boardman. School district can pay for their own SRO. That's where I'm coming from. We are growing, we can pay the additional $50,000 to have a full-time officer.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can, so, the school district as a whole can't afford to hire an SRO for each school district.
No, they're gonna hire for Boardman.
For each school. The agreement that we entered with the school district was to provide SRO services and that we would split that with the school. The value of the SRO is extremely important, especially when we look at what we tried to achieve over the years. When I first got here, I walked through the school and the kids wouldn't look at the police officers at all. They would turn away from them. That's heartbreaking. We don't want our students to feel that way. We want them to know that as a police officer, we're here to help you. And we want you to feel comfortable with us. Because we have that program in place, now we have a much better, stronger rapport with those students. As you can see, if you look at our gang issues that we had 12 years ago compared to where they are today, I would attribute it a lot to the SRO program and would encourage you to continue to fund that program.
I'm just saying that I don't think we're getting, I just don't think halftime is appropriate for either or.
So
I don't think halftime SRO for the school, and if that's not, if their primary assignment is SRO, then they need to be SRO.
So let me, he is a full-time police officer, 100% full-time police officer. His assignment is as a school resource officer. So that's his primary duties. As a police officer working in the schools, their officer safety skills are diminished because they're not as rigid, I would say. They're more approachable, they're more high-five and stuff, but you don't do that to the general public. So in the summer months, when the SRO is not performing those duties, he's out in a patrol car, working shifts just like the rest of the officers, trying to regain those skills and those officer safety skills that he's lost, basically, and try to re-up those. He works full-time in the school. During the summer months, he works full-time for us.
So he works an 8-hour day at the schools, is his primary assignment.
I have a question. How long have we had an SRO in Boardman?
I think we're at least at 6 or 7 years.
And in all that time, has Morrow County ever increased their granting dollars?
The school district?
Yeah, Morrow County School District.
No. But remember, where we get most of the money is through the credit card. That's who pays most of the money, both for the school side and for the city side.
I guess where I'm coming from is, I think, how do I say it without being a jerk? Just say, I just don't think the SRO is spending enough time in the schools. And so if there's not, so I guess my point would be is either, maybe I'm just, it's a misconception of me. I would think that for the amount, is he being pulled out? Is that SRO, I should say he, is the SRO being pulled out for other duties during the day when there's no activity that would be in the school?
So our contract with the school pretty much says that, one, I'm in full control of that person. I do all supervisory responsibilities. If in the event of an emergency, then we can utilize that SRO for whatever emergency there is. Aside from that, his responsibilities are the schools. I have to tell you that when an officer takes a report, they have to come here to type the report. They can't do it in the school environment. And the SRO takes quite a few reports. He also, when he takes a report, has to go to court on that report. So he's going to be going to court as part of his duties. So to say that he's not in school, I don't know what to tell you.
I guess the bottom line is, I think one entity should pay for it all. That's where I'm going. We need to have an SRO. If the SRO is going to be dedicated to school for a certain amount of time and a certain amount, then the school needs to pay for that. If the school doesn't, and then they split it accordingly that way. I guess I'm looking for a board-defined avenue of who's got the SRO, who doesn't have the SRO. Maybe this is the wrong point, but I think that if the school district is having a SRO, they need to pay more for it. If Boardman Police Department wants more PD, then they're gonna pay more for it. We're already hiring and planning on hiring a new staff, so we know that more employees for the police department is important. We know that the SRO is very important, and I'm not saying we get rid of the SRO. Somebody's gotta pay more. That's what I'm saying. So if the SRO, if it is, the school district's portion is $50,000, then they get $50,000 worth of SRO. And if that's whatever percentage that is, I guess that's where I'm gonna cut that.
Lisa?
I would have a couple comments, Paul. I think that there's a real benefit to the community, how all the schools have an SRO. So if you're looking for more funding that's not city of Boardman related funding, I think that is a good topic that we could have at the next disbursement meeting for press. And see if press would pick up more payment for all of the SROs. So I believe in the other schools, the county was picking up part of the cost of that too.
So with the county, the school district pays a portion, probably the same amount that we're paying, and that they pay us, and then the county picks up for those others.
Right, and I don't know what is going to happen in everything now. But no, it's a good comment, but I think that having that school resource officer is good for our community, not just for our school district. I think it's good for our kids, our citizens, to know that there's somebody there on a regular basis. Maybe you don't see it as much because you've got less student population than the other schools. Maybe your school doesn't have some issues that might be going on in some of the other schools. I don't know.
I also think that the school resource officer in the past has actually had teaching duties that they've done as a part of the SRO role at the high school.
Looking for more equitability.
Between
Everybody
the three
talks about
classrooms.
equitability. And if you want equitability for the police department, then you're gonna pay for equitability. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
So maybe it is discussion to go back to the CRES board or the Morrow County Educational
I think
Foundation,
the
wherever
school
that money
board
is
could
coming
come
from
to the CRES
directly
board,
and
yeah.
ask for a larger grant. dollar.
Maybe also be full tax.
He did.
I've been listening and it's been voiced that all the cities in Morrow County, Putner, Irrigan, and Boardman have an SRO officer. And Morrow County School Board pays $50,000. Who provides the SROs to Hefner and Erie? And does that 50,000 cover all three cities?
So
Sheriff's office.
because Deargan and Hefner have a contract with Morrow County Sheriff for their law enforcement services, that's who provides the SROs for those schools. And don't quote me, but I believe they get 50,000 for each one of those cities.
Well, that's not the way it's worded.
I can't control what the county does.
This is
that's
what-
not our
this is what
budget.
the city does.
I don't know what they're getting.
So for our budget, we are only budgeted for the 50,000 that is in the current agreement. Don't have any negotiations in place to put it in here differently. So we have the 50,000 budgeted from Morrow County School District for our school resource officer, and the 85,000 budgeted from CREZ 2 for our school resource officer.
I do have
So
one other question.
Go ahead.
I'm noticing here on page 10, where it talks about payroll costs. And from 21, 22 to 22, 23, we're getting one additional patrol officer or one additional employee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and he's gonna get paid $105,000 for his position? That's
No,
under
that's what I-
payroll cost. It went up 105,000
Right, and
from,
this is what I had explained to earlier, is that this includes the premium pay from the ARPA funds, and then also includes the COLA raises for the entire department.
so is that amount gonna stay current, or does it fluctuate? I know cost of living will go up, 3 or 4% a year. This year it's 8%. However, the two entities that you mentioned, are they gonna stay firm and continue to support this?
Yes, and those numbers, we're using what we know of. Whether CREZ decides to give the police department more money, we can't say, yes, that's definitely what they're gonna do. So we budget for what we're pretty certain that we're gonna get. But if we could potentially get more.
Thank you.
So my question, I guess, would be salaries is up 200,000 and payroll is up 105,000. Am I misreading it?
So all our payroll costs include all of the benefits, which includes PERS. PERS alone for police officers, aside from their 6%, which we pay into the unfunded actuarial liability, is 26.23%, somewhere around there, don't know the exact amount, but it's around that percentage. So whatever we pay them in their gross salary, that 26% goes to PERS.
20%, 26% of that total salary.
Yes.
So on top of it goes to PERS.
Correct. And then also in payroll costs, you have the health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, life insurance, long-term disability, accidental death and dismemberment, trauma care, all of those. So we use the percentages that the insurance company tells us, this is what you should budget for. We're expecting a 13% increase in medical, but only a 2% in vision. Or nothing in dental, but you're gonna see an 8% in vision. Well, vision insurance premiums are pretty low, so you have to say 8%, it's not a big jump. But if they were to say 8% for health insurance, that's gonna be a huge jump. So the payroll costs, that's why they fluctuate so much, because it just depends on what the economy is doing and where those insurance premiums are expected to fall.
So the payroll costs are the PERS dollars and the insurance benefit dollars. The salaries is the gross income.
Yes.
And so in the gross income over a 4-year spread, the gross income's gone up $400,000.
And we also budget in there, or I also budget in there, we have employees who like to carry We have employees who've been there for many, many years, and they like to carry a large vacation balance. They're allowed to cash that out. I have to allow every year for that cushion in case one of them decides they want to cash out a big portion of it. I don't know if they will, but I have to have that in my budget in case they do, because I can't tell an employee, I'm sorry, I can't let you cash out your vacation.
That's in salaries, you said?
Yes,
So the payroll, like we were talking before, is mainly benefits,
And
employee
PERS.
benefits.
yes.
And PERS.
So what?
And PERS.
Yes, which is an employee benefit,
Yes.
because they pay for it.
So just to recap on that $300,000 includes COLA, one more officer,
Premium
and
pay
the premium pay for all 12 officers.
and an allowance for any vacation payouts.
In the 300,000, the difference?
Our next department is the code compliance. That department doesn't have a lot of shifts. One of the big expenses this year is the code compliance computer. It is a tough book. It is one that has to be specially installed into the truck. It's so that they can run cases and communicate with dispatch. And so that's the biggest equipment expense, that it has. And other than that, there isn't very many changes in that department. It's pretty straightforward. Our facilities department, it looks like it went down, but not necessarily. Some of the expenses, if I'm able to allocate it to a specific department, I will move those over. And that is what happened with some of these, but I want to point out on the facilities department, if you look at our last line item for debt service, you will see that we've had 240,000 as actual and 240,000 as budgeted for the 21-22 year, but for this year, we're at 0. We will be paying off the mortgage on City Hall building this June. So next fiscal year, we will have no more outstanding mortgage on this building.
18 years.
In 18 years, yes. When Tom was here, he had increased the amount of payment, and then when I came on board, I did some calculations, and I said, we can increase it even more, and it's gonna save us some interest, and we're gonna pay it off sooner, so here we are. We will be debt-free on this building at the end
Good
of
job.
this fiscal year.
Good job.
Yes. Our last department within the general fund is the non-departmental fund. These are the ones that you can't really pinpoint them to one specific fund. So some of the, well, let me start with the biggest one. It says payroll costs, and I know we just talked payroll to death, but hear me out on this one. A couple of years ago, PERS had approached the state and then all the lobbyists saying, everybody who participated in PERS needs to do something because everybody's unfunded actuarial liability is just growing and growing and growing, and nobody sees an end sight as to actually catching up. The unfunded actuarial liability is PERS calculates how much this needs to have in assets in PERS to cover all the employees once they retire. And that unfunded actuarial liability is just that figure. This is how much more the city needs to contribute in order to pay. And obviously, this is an ongoing calculation and it changes every year. And this is why they update their PERS rates every 2 years. But nobody ever catches up. There are some cities that their unfunded actuarial is like 20 million.
This is on top of what the employee pays back? So the employee's paying back in first too, right?
No, the city is paying back. The
Oh, so
employee,
the-
the employee just contributes to their own account. The
Oh.
city pays the other
The
portion.
city also has to pay back their portion.
Yes,
So they're getting the employees and the businesses?
Municipalities. Public businesses, municipalities.
Well, I mean, anybody who pays into PERS, anyone pays into PERS, the employee pays back whatever percentage the state tells them they qualify for. And then the entity that also pays PERS, like the city of Boardman, has a percentage that they have to pay back in addition
Yes,
to what they pay their employees.
in addition to the 6% match.
That goes straight to the PERS fund.
Yes. To make sure there's funds there for when the
It goes
employees
to the
retire.
general PERS fund, but not to the employees' PERS. fund.
Correct, correct.
So you guys are getting messed over just like the employees are.
Everybody. yeah.
Correct. Everybody who pays into PERS.
So back to this,
Okay,
a couple years ago, the state finally said, oh, we have excess funds. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna provide a 25% match called an employer incentive fund. If we contribute X amount of money, the state will match 25%. And we have to send it in on a certain date. It was so popular that they ran out of money and they had a waiting list. The city of Boardman was put on a waiting list. And they told us, we have no idea if funds will become available in the future or not, but do you want to remain on the waiting list? And we said, yes. A few months ago, we received an email where the state says they're going to be doing a second round. And they're going to start with those on the waiting list. More information to follow in the future. And here we are, we still haven't heard any more, but that was a promising and almost a guarantee that this is coming. When this first round came out, we had approached city council, presented it to them, where we would ask for an interfund loan from the building department to send in this money so we could get the 25% match from the state. And once again, that is what we are anticipating to do with this next round of state matching funds. I've heard that we may be hearing something in the fall with a possible payment to be sent in January. So we wanted to make sure that that was available so that when that comes open, because that is one of the things we do have to have. We have to have the funds available in order to qualify. And we cannot ask for a loan from a financial institution to send it in. Interfund is okay because that's all city money, but we cannot go into debt with an outside entity and submit it. So this is what that 2,200,000, we don't have our exact amount. They tell us what our exact amount is that we can contribute and then they'll do the match to. So we want to make sure we have the funds available when that does become available to us.
That was gonna be my question, is there a max amount?
Yeah, and they will let us know what that is. So that's what that one is, and that's why it's new in there, the payroll cost. And it's non-departmental because it goes into that general fund. And I can't allocate out how much it goes to each department. So that's the big one there. Professional fees, that includes our architects, our consultants, our engineers for general things that we need to use them for. And community development, that includes our contributions to projects in conjunction with BCDA, the Boy Scouts who put out our flags on holidays, special projects, council expenses, the Christmas decorating, all of those. And for our transfers, this is where all the transfers come out of from this department, the non-departmental one. So the 4.6 million that we have in transfers, we are going to be transferring 2 million to our general reserve. 30,000 to the street fund. It needed a little bit help for this coming budget year, fiscal year. We are transferring 2 million to the street reserve. And that is 336,000 from the ARPA funds to the 1,383,000 from CREZ that we received, the $200,000 Amazon grant, And then 80.7 thousand from other revenues to complete the 2 million transfer to the street reserve so that we can do street projects. That is one of the main goals for the city right now is street projects, and we're working on that. Any questions on, any other questions on the general fund? Our water fund is an enterprise fund, which means only the money that we collect from providing water services is the money that goes in, and only the expenses that it takes to provide those water services is the money that goes out. That's why there's no other departments in this fund, and is treated almost as if it was its own business. The general fund is allowed to assist any other fund if it needs to, but the water fund isn't getting any assistance this year. The 21-22 year, we did a large transfer into our water reserve fund. And so that accounts for the lower beginning balance. But you can see we did 566,000 into our reserve. And again, it's for water infrastructure projects, is what our reserves are, the water reserve is for. Any questions on the water fund? Our sewer fund, page 17. This is another enterprise account, and so money in is from the utility bills for sewer services, and money out is the expenses for maintaining and providing those sewer services. Every now and then we get kind of a big repair when somebody hits a sewer line or something, but other than that, it's a pretty straightforward fund. We do anticipate transferring over 275,000 into the sewer reserve funds. Any questions on the sewer fund?
I have one.
Yes.
On 17, dues and fees. Last year was 9,000 and the proposed this year is 26,000. Can you address that, please?
Yes, so DEQ is having us perform an additional amount of testing from sample tissue to the moisture depth to just a lot of additional testing. And so we have hired IRZ Consulting to run those tests for us and provide some of the reports that DEQ requires. And Anderson Perry does some of the collecting and some of the other professional work that is needed to also satisfy the DEQ requirements. Any other questions? So our garbage fund, page 20. That again is another enterprise fund. The difference with this fund is that the city does not provide these services directly. We don't have staff that go out and collect the trash. We contract that out. It used to be sanitary disposal and it recently got bought out or sold to Waste Connections is the new provider. And you see that our service contract expense has been increasing, and that just shows how much this fund, how much busier it's been getting. A lot of it is increased dumpster and like the 11-yard ones and the 20-yard containers. And it goes across there. I mean, I get phone calls, well, sometimes when I help the girls answer phones, we'll get phone calls from a lot of residents who are, replacing their roof. So they need an 11-yard to throw the old roof into, or they're remodeling, or they're, putting in a new fence, or they're taking out the old one. So it's great that so many people are investing in their own property, and it just shows that, there's that home ownership pride, which Also, as part of this fund is the garbage vouchers that we offer 3 times a year. That comes out of this garbage fund, into the garbage service as well.
I have a question. So as we go through these water and sewer and garbage, how do we as a city help our citizens keep those costs down as they continue to inflate up? So as the water bills continue to grow, as they're gonna grow, and our sewer bills and our garbage bill, which is gonna go, you know, the costs are gonna increase. How do we combat that as a city to help our citizens to have really good rates compared to everybody else?
I'm looking back on here, I think I have listed the last time we actually did a rate increase, and it has been a while. It was 2019, I believe, was the last time we had a rate increase. When we've done our infrastructures for water and for sewer, we have tried to place as much money as we can into the reserves for each reserve appropriately to fund those projects, so that we do not have to get it from our residents and up their water rate or their sewer rate, so that we can make the payment on debt that we incur for those projects. We've been successful at that. This last go round, when we proposed the GEO bond for the water and wastewater projects, that was one of the things that we considered, was if we did a USDA loan, which is a low interest loan, what would that translate into for our residents, for our customers? Right off the bat, USDA said, you gotta increase the rates, because we have to have a guaranteed payment. No, none of the city councilors were too fond of that idea. Versus doing a GEO bond, the customer's rates would stay the same. Your property taxes for a lot of people are tax exempt when you do your taxes, so that would help them. And we've kept those water rates low. And like you said, compared to the areas, the cities around us, we continue to be very much lower than what they are.
I'm just curious how we did that, because I think that's pretty important that we don't get into the idea that we're just gonna jack rates up to make things nice.
It's very encouraging when you pass that bond.
I remember, because you guys made it the city council at that time, the city council at that time did a very good job on getting that out to people, that's the plan, and that was a good thing.
Well, I think another thing, Paul, was that they went from 2 times a year for the 3 months to 3 times a year, and that gives people one more opportunity to go take advantage of that if they choose to. That's definitely a cost benefit to all of
We
the
can talk a bit
businesses.
about that thing too.
Well, I guess I'd like to interject in here, because where we hire the garbage to be done, we have they tell us what to charge. You know what I mean? So they went up this year, I believe. So that has probably nothing that we can control. You know, we really considered when we were going out for the bond, because I think what they said that we had to raise our water to $40.
$45.
Yeah.
And the
Okay.
sewer was gonna be comparable. Yeah, it's gonna be $100 a month.
Oh, no, it would have way more than doubled your bill, because you're only paying $17.33 or something for water now. So we couldn't see going out to people that are on fixed incomes particularly, and saying, oh, by the way, I can get this hot deal from the government if you want to pay a lot for it.
And that's part of the reason I brought up the garbage, is we don't get to dictate the price of that.
But they've
So-
always been they try hard.
I think the other benefit is they can keep, our garbage rates in Morrow County are actually lower than other cities and municipalities, because we have the benefit of Finley Butte. And because,
Tipping fees.
and tipping, right, thank you.
Tipping fees are huge.
Right.
And that was the whole
Absolutely.
comment, or idea is as these expenditures go up for the garbage, how do we combat that to help our citizens? To make sure that they feel like, hey, it's not cost effective, we have garbage anymore, I'll find a different way to throw it out.
No, you don't have a choice. That,
You will pay for the city.
Oh, so you don't have a choice of having your own, so you have to pay for garbage.
yes, even in the city limits. That's why you don't see these trailers next to your house with bags of garbage in them, waiting for the free dump month to go out there. That it is an ordinance that you have to have. And that you have to take your garbage can up off the street, by the way, which I thought
And
was.
because of that, I think it's important that we work very hard, I'm not saying that we don't, but correct, to make sure that our garbage doesn't get out of whack.
No,
Especially with what's going on right now as far as how everything's jacked is going up, just being expensive, fuel costs alone.
Yeah, that has been the reason the garbage company has come to us in the past, and asked for an increase. Is due to pricing.
In our street fund, like I mentioned before, this was the fund that was gonna need just a little bit of help this year. And we transferred, we're gonna be transferring $30,000 in to help them out. We don't have any huge increases in expenses to say, oh, this is why. But the street fund is not like the enterprise funds that it has a revenue source where it collects money for a service. You know, we don't have any tolls. We don't have anything that we can charge for street-wise, transportation-wise, to collect resources from.
We can make tolls.
Well, if you
Oh,
build
yeah.
a bridge.
Did I really just hear that?
If you build a
Well,
bridge or a freeway.
The
you might.
cities that do have a bridge and they have a toll fee, that's the type of fund where it goes into. Well, we don't have any of those. We receive state road tax revenues. So the Oregon Department of Transportation shares some of their taxes with us. That is the big funding source for this fund. And then we'll get some interest off of it or something like that. And that's why the general fund has stepped in to assist this fund with its just day-to-day expenses. We have striping that is done throughout the city every year. We have walking paths that have to be replaced where they're posts that are there to protect the pedestrians, get run over, and we've got to have those repaired. We have guardrails that get hit in the winter time, and we have to get those repaired. So, you know, somebody runs over a stop sign, knocks it over, we have to get that repaired. So all of those type of expenses are what come out of this fund.
And the people who wreck into these things don't have to pay that back.
If we know who they are, and we try to go after those, but there's a lot of times where it happened at night and nobody else was there.
Okay.
But if we can, we do try.
We're right at the 1 hour mark. Is this a good spot to take a short recess? All right, 5 minutes.
We just mute, is that what we do?
Go, Martha, go.
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, wait, you thought you was unmuted. Okay, so we're now at the building fund, page 26. Last year, the building fund took on the contract to provide services to Gillette County. It was halfway through the year, so they were not in the original budget. They're not in the budget. This year, they are. So part of the increase in this fund is Gillette County. And the other increase is the expected buildings and plumbing, mechanical permits that the building official feels pretty confident will be coming into our area in the 22-23 fiscal year.
I do have a question. I don't know if I caught it when you first started. The $300,000 increase in contractual fees, did you address that?
Down in expenditures?
Yes.
No, I haven't. I was addressing the resources
Okay.
first, yeah. But in contractual fees, now that you brought that up, because that is our biggest jump. Also halfway through this current fiscal year, Morrow County, or I guess it was before that, but it became effective in January. Morrow County approached the city and wanted an increase in the permit fees that we collect and remit back to them. And that went from being 25% to 50%. So that's what that large increase is. And taking into account that it's 50% of the permits in Morrow County, that's how that figure was estimated there. And the exciting one is our construction costs for the expansion of the building. We wanted to make sure that we had enough in our contingency as well for that expansion. Just because of the construction environment that we're in, it wouldn't be surprising for some of the vendors to add on some sort of a fuel surcharge. Or some of the supplies to just all of a sudden they go up in price. And some of the furnishings might increase. So that's why we have that COVID contingency there. But we are, I'm not sure we're at 100% complete on design quite yet, but if not, we're like at 99.5%. And the RFP will be issued here shortly, which is a request for proposals from contractors. So this summer, you're going to start seeing some movements.
Does the city council to get a look at the plans?
We did see those.
Yes.
Did we approve the plans? Or not approve the plans?
I think we all
Or
love
do we
them.
not have a say on things? I mean, or just,
We love them.
I'm just saying, where was the blessing given?
Only when you approve the contract. Do you have a conceptual?
Well, I said that the drawings are about 99.5% complete. So we're working on the very last details of the drawings.
So who has the last say of what the building looks like?
We have our city manager and our assistant city manager review it with our building official, and he's reviewed it with his staff to make sure that it's functional and it's what
So
everybody
the city
needs.
council doesn't have a say over what the building looks like? Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, I mean, we're the ones that answer to it, so I was just kind of, when do we, as the city council, say yea or nay, or do we not say yea or nay?
I don't believe we say or nay. I mean, I don't think it's within our field of what we advise.
Sure it
the
is.
city on. I don't personally see myself having any preference of color of shingle scheme picked out.
I'm not talking about, I mean, so you don't think you have any say on what the building should look like? You don't,
the city's already kind of navigated a design choice with what's already here and with what we saw. It looked to be an addition that went with the same design.
So it wouldn't look,
We saw that, I'm just saying, where did we get the blessing that that is approved?
Lisa has something.
Does it have a separate entrance or it is?
It will.
I don't know, maybe I missed it, I'm just looking at,
It should be in the minutes that we have.
Yeah, the building official came and gave a presentation.
I understand that, is that when we gave the blessing that says we don't care what it looks like, here's where you go and have it, that you gave us your plan? And we just blessed them with the money, is that what we did?
So, Mr. Mayor, it was posed to the council whether or not we should move forward in the design process, and
I get that,
I believe that's what you authorized us to do.
to go, and so when does,
Process.
so when does the city council, or does the city council say the final blessing on the design? Or do they not get a final say on the design?
Well,
It's taxpayer money, I would imagine.
I guess if the city council is requesting us to come back to the city council, we can do that. Pretty much said, move forward in the design, however we did.
Well, if that's when we said gave our blessing, then we gave our blessing then, I didn't think it was that we were moving that forward that fast. That's all I'm saying. If I don't have to, if we don't have to give a blessing on, hey, that's gonna be the final design, and guess who's on the hook? The city council is. As far as I'm concerned, I think staff is on the hook if people don't like it.
So,
Am I wrong?
Mr. Keeper, I think that we did agree for Glenn to go forward with getting the drawings, put it together, and then this would be the budgeted amount for the proposal that we did see. So I think that the only thing left is to come up with the final drawing and share that with the city council, and if there's,
Oh, I
big
didn't get that
objection.
part. I thought that wasn't gonna happen. That's just what I got out of this.
I
meeting.
think that Glenn planned to bring that back to us. Yeah.
He's gonna first present it.
Present
Yeah,
it
questions then.
when he's got it all ready, but we agreed to go forward
I'm
with,
not arguing that point, I'm just
Okay.
saying, I got the impression that nothing's coming back to the city and the blessing is given and what comes is what's gonna come, because we gave an initial blessing on what's going on, and I don't think that's right. Don't want my staff to be on the hook for $6 million that the city or whatever, I think the city council should be on the hook for the $6 million. Or whatever the price of the building is. That's where I'm coming from. Because as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a final say. We just had the preliminary and said, go forward and conquer. So,
Again, Mr. Mayor, in order to get a cost and a budget put together to build a facility, we have to do design, because that's what dictates what the cost is gonna be. So the design is at 99.8% complete. And then hopefully we'll know more detailed costs by then. And we'll come back to you and give you a presentation of the design of the building.
so that's gonna happen.
The outside of the building will look pretty much, well, the inside.
I remember seeing that.
Pretty much what you saw.
well, then I think that we can certainly request that the staff bring the final blueprints and the information to the city council. But this is sort of where we approve that we're willing to spend that money on that project.
Or I guess my only concern, I could care. Say it correctly. I just don't want to say, okay, I approve the budget, go forth and conquer, and that's all they do. I guess that's where I'm coming from, and that's kind of where I felt like I was at about 5 minutes ago. We already said go forth and conquer, and we're gonna build, and somebody says, hey, you're building something. Yeah, I'm building something, but go ask the staff, they'll tell you what it is, because we had little information. That's where I was coming from. And I didn't think that was right. So if that's not the way it's gonna be, and we're gonna get a final yay or nay by the council, say, yeah, okay, it's gonna cost X, Y, and Z money. We budgeted, we approved that, but I would think that there needs to be a final say of, yeah, that money is gonna be spent. Or, Mr. Mayor, for council, it's gonna cost 15 mil, or 1.5 million more, we need to, what are we gonna do?
So I think you bring up an interesting point, and it's valid that if we don't really know what the process is, we should be able to ask that question. So is there a process? Do either of you know if there's a process to this? Like, is it a done deal if we approve the budget with the amount in here? Or do we get a chance to see the final blueprints and say yes or no?
So I would tell you that you approved us moving forward with the design, the conceptual design of the building. And in order to give you a budget of what it's gonna cost, we had to do a design of the facility. We have done that, we're at 90% done. Hopefully we'll be done fairly soon with that, and then we'll probably get to nail down cost a little bit more. But we can't give you exact cost until it's complete. We will be more than happy to come back and share the design of the building and give you a more in-depth cost. But from our projections, that's probably gonna be in that neighborhood.
Okay, so I feel like, from what I've heard, that we will get a chance to look at the blueprints, talk to Glenn, and if there's something outlandish or something that we simply don't agree with, or we think is a misappropriation of those dollars, we would have an opportunity to have that discussion at that time. Am I misunderstanding what you're saying? Does that,
You just wanna make sure we're gonna get whatever's proposed on the budget for the building.
well, and that our building, that we're agreeing.
I guess I'm just irritated that we were gonna build a building and I was gonna have the city council was gonna have a final say on what the building was to look like. We had conceptual, but when it comes down to, hey, this is what it is, this is what it, and this is gonna have much time, and you already put in the money, so you're just gonna build, and I didn't think that was right. That's where I'm coming from.
So did you want to be on the design committee?
That's not what I'm saying.
Yes, but it is what you're saying.
No, it isn't what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, just like any other public entity, once you get your final design and your total cost, I think you would probably come to the group, the body of the group and say, this is what we're gonna do, and do you think, or do you give our blessing on the total cost and the design and everything else? That's what I think should happen.
I think that's what we're calling, that's happening.
Okay, then I just didn't think that was happening 10 minutes ago.
So Lisa also has a comment.
I was just gonna say, if that process happens, conversely, you might also say, we think you need to add another conference room, or we think you need to add 2 more offices. You know, depending on where those dollars come out on that construction estimate, you'll know where you are compared to what you budgeted. And if you think there's value in making it a little bit larger, I have no idea how big it is.
And I don't know how nitty gritty you want to get, but maybe you want to pull up all the carpet on that side of the building so that the carpet is the same throughout both portions. Or I don't know, but you could be that detailed or more like what Lisa
I just
said.
think there was a misconception as staff versus as myself. I feel that staff felt like they had full control of what was going on. I'm not saying they did. And I just felt like there needed to be an approval by the body that, yeah, this is what I think the county or the city council would like to do. And we give you, and we finalize the deal. And it's not the city coming and say, hey, we're starting pushing ground, and it's like, that's where I'm coming from.
I don't know that I agree or disagree with you, but I like the idea that we're not just unilaterally saying yes to something. If there's a process to it and we can look at it when it's more measurable for us. Tonight is not that night. Lisa.
I was just going to say, I don't know how the city does it. I know how the court does it. we put a budget together, it's estimates of revenues, estimates of expenses, estimates of any unanticipated grants that, you know, we may get to have an expenditure for. It doesn't give a department free rein to go out and spend $100,000 on a tractor just because there's a line item that says $100,000. So, I mean, ultimately, the public body still is held accountable, so.
That's a great synopsis. Does that address the concern, Mr. Speaker? Are there any other comments about the building fund budget?
The next fund is the water reserve fund, the general reserve fund, page 30. So the general reserve fund doesn't generate any revenues, it's money that's transferred in from our other operating funds. This is our savings account in a sense, for major repairs, for major improvements. And it's funny that Brenda had just mentioned as we were talking about the expansion, and she said, well, what if they want to pull up all the carpet and get it to match with the new building? Carpet replacement is one of the things that we would like to do, and not necessarily because we want it to match, but because the carpet, there are certain areas where it has become a safety hazard. It's lifting up. We momentarily patched the worst section that we have right now, but it is becoming a safety concern in some areas. So that is one of the things that we would like to do. And in the 18 years that we've been in this building, it has not been painted on the inside, and we would like to do that as well. Kind of when all the construction is going, get it all done at the same time. So those are some of the capital projects that we have here in our general fund reserve.
Okay.
It's like you knew.
I have to, just thinking about my own house.
And for the past 3 years that I know of, we have had to replace 2 HVAC units a year. Just because after 15 years, they start to fail, you can't find parts anymore, and you just have to replace them. So we also allow for those type of repairs, because we just never know when they're gonna go out.
What line item is that?
It'll be in your capital purchases.
Okay, thank you.
Our general reserve fund is also the fund that funds the urban renewal districts. And that is what the loan there for 2 million, that's the loan to the central urban renewal district that we talked about. And the rest will remain for our reserve. The water reserve fund, similar, this fund tends to receive money either from the general fund or from the water fund. These are the funds that we use for our infrastructure improvements or repairs. This year, we have capital purchases at 545,000 budgeted in there. And that is for the water line on Northwest Columbia Avenue. Some of the construction projects that we have going, sometimes we think like, oh, we're just gonna repair this street. But then once we actually get to digging and making improvements, we kind of find out like, oh, this part of the water line is old or it's damaged. Since we've got this, most of it dug up here, why don't we go ahead and get this repaired? So we also allow for those type of repairs in our budget, because some of the water lines are old, and as we work on other projects, it just makes sense to go ahead and repair those versus saying, you know, when we have the financial capability, rather than saying, well, just cover it up, we'll have to project it for next year's budget. So we like to be a little proactive on that. And that addressing Paul Keeper's question earlier about how to keep our costs down for our customers. That's one of the ways. Because instead of saying as well, you know, well, we're gonna raise the water rate so we can fix that part that we discovered. We like to use our reserves. Our sewer reserve fund, page 32, works in a very similar way as the water reserve. And once we did the scoping on Northwest Columbia Avenue, they discovered that, oh, you know, the sewer line's just as old, it needs to be replaced as well. This is a perfect example of, like I said, we think we're gonna work on one project and then something else comes up. So we have that in there. The extension of the sewer line over on Lower Lane is also budgeted here. And for those other unanticipated sewer breakages, when somebody perforates our sewer line, things like that happens.
Are there any questions about the water or sewer reserve funds?
Our street reserve fund is the one that I mentioned we're transferring a lot of money into this year. And we've been trying to work this fund to accumulate money in the last couple of years because street projects are very expensive and we want to be able to pay for as much of these infrastructure projects that we can with our reserves rather than go into debt. So we do have street reserve fund paying for a lot of projects. We have the Laurel Lane, we have Northwest Columbia. The design for the Northeast Columbia sidewalk.
So Martha, it's a good fund to put planned projects, kind of like, I would say it's probably not the right word, but you know, planned projects for the street, is that kind of where the money's going?
Yes, when we do the city council workshop, we kind of go through a list of all the projects. And just depending on how the world revolves, you know, sometimes a project was a lower priority, it didn't seem as important, and if something happens, or, you know, a sewer line breaks, and we have to go in there and repair it, and all of a sudden, well, we might as well repair the street, because now we have to break it apart even more. So it just kind of
And that's
depends
where that
on,
money would come from,
yes.
on those emergency things.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Or like she's saying too, like if there's a repair that's designed and we're there already, and we recognize that there's an error or a problem or a decaying pipe of some kind, it's a good chance to use that reserve fund to repair that portion so that it doesn't cost the taxpayers money to seal it up and then go back in it again a year from now.
Question.
Go for it.
So with a lot of the like new development happening and new lines going through the city streets, who is responsible for repairing those? Is it the city responsible or is it the company that's doing the repair or that addition?
So the new streets that are being put in by developers, if
No, well, so for example, Wolf Work, there's a new development going in, but the road is torn out for the lines that they had to go and connect to, but it hasn't been repaired. So I'm just curious, is it the developer's responsibility to repair that, or is it the city's?
no, it's the developers,
Oh.
yeah. They have to,
Patch it.
yeah, they have to repair anything that they have to dig up like that, because they're putting in some other infrastructure like water lines, sewer lines and so forth, and they have to repair all of that.
They did do that.
On their- And this also is for, Front Street, we have that one. That's a project, Front Street, and to connect to Oregon Trail. So we do have a lot of, street projects that, of course, are all running at the same time as our GeoBond project, and it's just a go, go, go.
So are you saying that the street reserve fund could be used as a transfer for the urban renewal? Is that what you're talking about for the Front Street?
Oh, no, sorry, yes, the Front Street is gonna be through the central urban renewal. Thank you for that. No, it is not being funded through the street fund, it's being funded through the central urban renewal district, and it's receiving its transfer from the general.
So the urban renewal is funded by the general. fund.
Yes, yes,
And
sorry.
things that are outside of the urban renewal would be through a reserve fund.
It could,
Could,
yeah.
could,
Yeah, just because it's in this, it is in an urban renewal, it doesn't mean they have to fund it. But that's what they were developed for, is to improve that infrastructure within them, so.
thank you.
And then as the taxes go up, it pays back to the general fund.
Our capital project fund. This is our geo bond fund. So this is where, the project's costs will come out of. Our beginning balance is, the rollover of the geo bond proceeds, and our other revenue is the, anticipated interest, that money will earn. And as we spend it down, that interest will of course come down as well.
I have a question for you. Where is the grant that we received from the county for the $360,000?
That is a different fund.
Oh, I
So-
thought it was part of the jail.
So the geo bond has two funds, one to account for the actual infrastructure expenditures and how we're spending the geo bond proceeds. And then we have a debt service fund that tracks the property taxes coming in and the payments going out. And that's where that other fund will be,
I see.
that the grant will be in,
Okay.
because it'll be used to pay out debt. So everything that is in the capital project fund is just the expenditures, on the geo bond projects.
So then does that reduce the tax liability to all the taxing, all the people who are paying taxes?
Yeah, I'll get to that when we get to that fund.
All right.
Any questions on the capital project fund? Another excitement was we finished our community development block grants. That one was closed and then December. They are having an open house this Friday with us, and they start at 3, but they're having a presentation at 4. So everybody's invited to that, and, exciting, that one is all done and goes on our books. The debt funds are next, and so our first one is the Geo Bond Debt Service Fund. Like I said, this one only keeps track of taxes coming in and any other grants or revenue that we may receive. And then the payment that we have to submit for our debt obligation. So we submit an interest payment in June, no, interest payment December, and interest was principal in June. And that's what this fund tracks. So any money that we receive that is specifically for the lowering of debt, of that would be going here. And that's where you see other revenue. That is for anticipated for next year, Brenda. So the money that we receive this year to go towards it is in the beginning cash, because we're rolling it over. Okay, the beginning cash. Right. And you'll see the breakout of the debt service payment down in expenditures. These additional grants are allowing to have a little bit of a reserve, which we're allowed to carry. Depending on how fast we spend down our geo bond proceeds, we were notified, always be aware that you might have a positive arbitrage, and which is, you might have to pay some of it back because you have too much and you're making too much in interest and so on and so forth. So we're allowing for that. And also, when we make our payment in December, we won't have all the property taxes collected by then, so we didn't have the funds available to make our debt obligation payments. Our last two debt funds are the water bond fund and the sewer bond fund, which we're closing out. those were refunded when we did our GO bond fund. The only reason they kind of stayed open for another year was one of the transactions we had to make right at year end was an additional payment towards the debt. They got closed off between all the transactions that went back and forth when we sold our GO bond. And so that left these two funds kind of in a negative, and only the prior year's taxes assessed, people paying their taxes late. Those tax dollars coming in were the ones that were going there to help zero those out. Our water bond fund will have approximately $6,000 left, and we're gonna go ahead and transfer that in. And our sewer bond fund is still gonna be about $1,850 short, so we're gonna transfer from the sewer reserve fund that amount so that we can close those two out. And we will only have the GO bond debt fund. And those are all of our funds, and the only thing that you have left is all your summary pages that either have it by category. The very last page that we need to look at is page 47. Our estimated debt outstanding on July 1st of 2022 is $16,945,000, and that's our general obligation bond. And the last table is the property tax levy. I would ask that you approve and keep our permanent rate levy, which is our rate limit per 1,000 is $4.2114. And our levy for our general obligation bond will be $310,100.
Which is lower.
So when you say the permanent rate levy, what is that for? Is that for the,
That's the property taxes that come in for the city of Boardman.
that's what the city charges?
That's
The property
where,
tax for
when
city.
these permanent tax rates were established for the state, that's where the city fell. And we would like to collect that full amount.
So when so if I was to figure out how much money I gave to the city of Portland, that's the number I use for 1,000.
Yes, less than your 5.
But then you need to add, if you have to add a fire department and lots of the other
Oh,
special
yeah.
districts.
Yeah.
Just so that if you're trying to
This-
make your tax dollar, you're figuring.
I'm figuring the city of Portland, because I think the city of Portland would be a separate line item. I haven't looked at my taxes for a while.
It is.
And then the fire department knows. So when I would figure out what I gave exactly to the city, that's the number of that.
It's identified.
It'll tell you.
Yeah. I know that's not good about. So is this, did I read this right, that our total budget for our city is $63 million?
Oh, isn't that something?
Yes.
It's about growth than that, I was always thought it was like 20, and we're at $63 million.
Last year, the county's was 66 million, and ours was like, was it 53 or 58?
54 or 55.
And I thought, oh. And then you get, the geo bond and stuff, you start adding 20 million here.
So that 63 includes the geo bond.
Yes.
So without the geo bond, we'd get 40, roughly 40.
Well, if you took the geo bond and the building department out of there, you'd be down.
Oh, because we got so much money, okay.
Yeah.
We got some other things that are making it higher than. That wouldn't be called inflated, would it?
No, it's true figures, it's money.
Earmarked, but it's earmarked for other purposes. Is there any public comments about the budget that Martha presented? Lisa has.
I would just like to say, I think Mara does an amazing job on this, and you guys are lucky to have her, because this is a beautifully presented budget. And I guarantee you, any line out and ask her exactly what it is, and she's going to tell.
And a balance.
And who we paying that money to keep it here? And I'm being absolutely serious.
Yes, we had our.
Because if they're not, it's gonna teach me, and I will work really hard to get some pay raise. for this year.
I have a public comment. I want to hear what Lisa said about Marta and the presentation, but I also want to say thank you to the people who've asked really hard questions, because it actually makes us really think about what we're doing and how we're appropriating dollars, and that we're genuinely invested in the outcome of what we decide today. So, thank you. It's only for you, Mr. Keeper.
No, it's not. Be honest.
He's picking on me, Mr. Beagle. I have to get even. Okay,
Well,
so
I guess then I would like to say, because I do think that this is a process. And I agree that if you have a question, you should ask it. Because it's better to ask it and get an answer, whether you like the answer or not. If you cannot, your responsibility is to ask those questions and make sure that you're clear on what we're doing. And, you know, like you say, you go out in the street and if someone stops and asks you, you need to have some kind of an answer. And it's, the answer shouldn't be, well, because they told me so. You know, so Martin did a nice job of laying out and trying to describe how our money works. And so that's great too, so. That's not a public comment.
unless anybody else has anything. So I would entertain a motion.
Okay. Is it written down?
It is on
It's on
the
this
paper.
blue sheet.
Okay. I move that the City of Boardman Budget Committee approve the proposed City of Boardman budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year as presented in the amount of $63,876,765. And approve property taxes at the rate of 4.2114 for 1,000 of assessed value for the permanent tax rate levy, and in the amount of $310,100 for the general obligation bond levy.
So, do we have any discussion?
Thank you for participating.
So let's go ahead and have a roll call, please, Jim.
Approved.
Junior.
Approved.
Katie Mertz. Leslie Pearson.
Yes.
Brenda Crawford. Yes. Isaac Williams.
Approved.
Emerald Lantis.
Yes.
Lisa Hussler.
Yes.
Alejandra Guzman.
Yes.
And Sonia Neal.
Yes.
And Paul Kiefer.
Yes.
So the budget has been approved, and I would like to adjourn the budget meeting. I don't have that. There we go. I did.